Great. I think we can get started.
Okay.
Great. So, for everyone who joined today, really welcome. I think we're gonna spend a wonderful 1 hour with you guys. So you might already heard about Mira or not, and you might already know Mira is doing a series of free webinars, and we invite the best doctors from this country to share their expertise with you and to help you to answer the most practical questions so you know what to do. So before we start, I just want to introduce myself, and also I want to introduce our speaker today, which is Dr. Marc. So I'm Sylvia, and I'm the CEO and the co-founder of Mira Fertility. Some of you might be already using Mira, and some of you may not know what Mira is. But basically, Mira is the really small home testing device. It looks like this, and it measures your actual fertility hormone concentration. So that means Mira gives you your hormone numbers. So it can tell you when you're fertile, when you're not fertile, when is your ovulation. And the most important thing is because Mira can get down to really precise measurement because we give you the actual number instead of 2 lines versus 1 line, like a guess. So Mira will really personalized towards your fertile window. We know every woman is different, and we know every cycle is different. So Mira can really, pinpoint to your fertile window, your ovulation, and you can get Mira on miracare.com. And so today, our topic for our webinar, we really want to focus on the fertility and age. So I would like to invite Dr. Marc to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. So yeah, my name is Dr. Marc Sklar. I am a natural fertility expert. One of my passions and goals is to really help couples improve their egg and sperm quality. In this situation today, we're talking about egg quality. And if you want more information, I put together a guide and a workbook and a training all on this topic. And we're going to go into a lot of that today, but you can always get a little bit more information by using that link right there, which is marcsklar.com/egg quality. You get a ton of information in the training as well, and in the workbook that you'll get from that. You know, I've been in the fertility space for 17, 18 years. And the biggest thing that always gets asked of me, whether it's on social media, on YouTube, emails, direct message, whatever it is, it's always the same questions. What can I do to improve egg quality? Right now, so that's partly why I put together this resource for all of you. It's also why when Sylvia and I were talking about putting this together, we thought this would be an important topic for all of you, because it's a very common question, and one that we all want a little bit more support with. I want to just mention that for all of you who are here, that many of you are often looking or asking, maybe you don't ask in this way, but often what you're hoping for and wishing for is this like magic pill to help flip the switch when it comes to egg quality. And what we're going to talk about today doesn't involve a magic pill. It's not one thing. It's a multitude of things that you can be doing to support and change and improve your egg quality. And so I want all of you to start to take for a moment to clear your mind and get rid of these preconceived notions that it's one thing that's going to change everything, versus and be open to the possibility of taking in new information, which is going to give you new resources and a new perspective on how to improve and enhance egg quality and fertility.
That's great. And we know that for our Mira user, a lot of us are just like in our 30 years old or even older. So we may wonder, what we're gonna do and how is what can we do actually to improve our equality so we can get pregnant faster and more successful when we are already at this age. So that will be the topic we wanna discuss today. So before we start, I just wanna tell everyone that this will be really casual and it will be conversational. So our goal is to make this 1 hour really helpful to you. So please type your answer to the Q&A section in Zoom. I believe there is a box either on top of your screen or at the bottom of your screen, and it says Q&A. So type that question over there, and we will vote feel free to vote as well for the most popular questions, and we will get them answered. We want this to be helpful to you. And then also at the same time, there's a great news. If you're not a Mira user yet and you are interested to get Mira, and you can use a code called Fertility TV. So Dr. Marc has a wonderful YouTube channel. You guys have to check it out. It's called the Fertility TV. It has many, many subscribers, and it covers all kinds of fertility topics and in a really interesting way. So now if you enter the code Fertility TV, when you check out at Mira, you're gonna receive $25 off for your order. So before further ado, I think we can get into the topics directly. So we like to start something with age because today's topic is about, if I'm 35 years old, what can we do? So maybe Dr. Marc, we can start with some facts. You can tell our audience if a woman is already 35 years old, and what are really the chances, and maybe should she seek for fertility treatment immediately? Is there any specific recommendations such as treatment or even like lifestyle you would recommend if she's trying to conceive?
Yeah, absolutely. These two questions are so valuable and so important for all of us because it gives us, especially the first one, really gives us a lot of real understanding for what our chances are and what our percentages are. And I often ask couples that I work with, I often ask them this question: what do you think your chance of conception is at whatever age they are? And invariably, everybody always says higher than what it really is. Okay. So when we were all 20, we had our best chance of conceiving children. Roughly late teens to, early 20s is our perfect window of opportunity where our chances of conception are at its peak. And even at that time, our chances were only 25 to 30% chance. So really not that high at your most fertile time, which means that when you were at that age range, you needed at least 4 months of trying to know if you were going to be successful. And I know that we all say, well, so-and-so told us when we were growing up that it's very easy to get pregnant, and we took sex education classes when we were growing up, and they scared us to think that we could get pregnant just by touching someone. And, we always need to be careful. And not that we all shouldn't have been careful at that time, because I'm not sure how many of us were ready to have children. But they did that just purely for fear. They were just trying to scare you because they didn't want you to have children at that age. They wanted you to wait, right? But what they did was they ruined your understanding of your chances of conception and what the reality was. And so even at that age, you only had a 25 to 30% chance, which means as we continue to age and get older at that time, that our chances only go down. So we don't have an exact correlation, but we do know that at 35, from 35 and below, we have a higher chance of conception. And once we hit 35 and we get older, then our chances go down. And so, I would say around 35, our chances are about a 15% chance every cycle. Okay. And then there are thresholds. From 35 to 38 is one threshold, from 38 to 40 is another, 40 to 42, 42 to 45, and then 45 and older. And with each one of those thresholds, our chances of conception decrease. okay? So we need to do everything that we can to improve our chances. Now, with all of that being said, I am one who pays very little attention to age. It's not that age is not important, but it's the only variable that any of us cannot change, right? There's nothing we can do. We can't go backwards, reverse the aging process. We can't say, well, although sometimes if I ask my wife how old she is, or someone asks her, she, fibs a little bit and says she's much younger than where she really is, right? Because no one wants to talk about their age as we're getting older. But the reality is we can't change our age. So for me, age is not something I like to focus on, other than we need to understand what the reality is of our chances are every cycle at any given age range. Mm-hmm. And the other reason, and for me, this is really the most important reason why age is a factor, is that age will push us to make certain decisions faster than we wanted to, or maybe even sooner, right? Like it's a determining factor for family planning, and it's a factor that we all need to consider as we're trying to make decisions about how many children we want to have, at what age, spanned apart, those sorts of things. So age for me is more of a factor in terms of trying to family plan and make decisions about how to move forward and when to move forward, more than it is a variable that I want to spend a lot of attention on to make changes. So, and the other piece with age is I think that as we get older, we have to be more aware of the other variables at play that need attention. So when you're younger, let's say you're 20, maybe you don't have to worry so much about what you're eating and how much sleep you're getting and those things, because you're having fun and you're just enjoying life. But as we get older, we do have to start to pay attention to all those additional lifestyle variables, because now age is a bigger factor and our percentages go down. So we want to do anything that we can to really start to push or slow down the aging process and push those percentages up. So that's why aging for me, or age specifically, is a variable and is a factor that helps determine how we're going to move forward. But I don't want any of you to get caught up in age in and of itself. I know a lot of couples make decisions just on age. They say, well, we're 40, so because we're 40, we have to now move forward with IVF or whatever it is. And I have a woman who messages me frequently through Facebook Messenger, and she's 38, and she's been having this dialogue with herself and with a little bit with me as well about, what things should I do given my age, because I'm 38 and I'm getting older. If your health is good, if your hormones look healthy, if you eat well, if your lifestyle is well, if you have a regular menstrual cycle, menstruation's good, it's consistent, you ovulate, libido's healthy, sperm count is good, don't worry about your age. Focus on what you can control and keep doing all the positive things, because your chances are still high. Now, if you're looking at all of those different variables that I just mentioned very quickly, and there's a lot of those things that are not functioning well or need attention, then I think age plays a role, because your chances are already a bit lower. Maybe you have to make decisions faster. So don't get caught up in this age factor. Focus on the things you can control, that you can change, and that you really do have power over. So that's my long answer to the whole chances of conceiving after 35.
Great, thanks, Dr. Mark. So I think there's really a myth around, right? So sometimes we're thinking that, oh, I'm 30 or I'm 35. That's like a threshold. It seems like when I was 34, everything was fine, and now I'm 35, so it's the end of the world. But it's not really like that. So it's not like your fertility gonna drop so sharply, like gonna dip at age of 35.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
Everyone will be different.
I love that you say that, because the example I usually give, okay, and I have this conversation often. I feel like I say this every week. So maybe some of you who have been following me for a while have heard me say this before, but you know, if next week is your 35th birthday, and today you're 34, but next week you're 35, it's not like next week when you wake up on your 35th birthday that the light switch went off. You know, like our body is not a light switch. It doesn't happen that way. So, you know, don't be afraid of that age, right? Or don't be afraid of different birthdays and those thresholds. If your life and age is more like a light switch, and I'm looking to my right because I'm looking at my light switches on the wall. If it's like light switches, it's not a switch. It's not an on-off switch. It's a dimmer switch that can go down and it can go up. So think of your health and your fertility like that, right? If you don't do any of the right things, all you're doing is pushing that switch down, right, to turn off. But just as difficult as it was to push that down, it's the same thing to make it go up. You've got to make a lot of changes. You've got to make a lot of progress, but it's possible. And you could push that switch up and turn it on or turn the light brighter and improve your health and your fertility as well. So think of it that way if you want to think of it as an on-off switch.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So now I think we start to get a lot of interesting questions related to age and fertility. So Haley asked a question and she said, how do we maintain our egg quality when we're getting older? Is there anything, you know, we could do when we're younger? And is there anything, you know, we need to keep doing to elongate the, you know, the lifespan of the good egg quality or something like that?
Yeah, which goes into this second question that's sitting on the screen as well. It's a nice blend because it says, which fertility treatment should I try after 35? So before you ever try any fertility treatments, you've got to think about your fertility, just like Haley just said, which is what can you do to preserve your fertility and preserve your health? So a lot of this comes down to all the foundational things. Think about your fertility as a pyramid. If you want to think about the food pyramid, it's the same thing. Think about a pyramid. At the bottom is this foundation, and then everything else is going to get built upon that. So first and foremost, you've got to eat well. You've got to exercise regularly. You don't have to overdo it, but you don't want to underdo it, right? You want to sleep well. You want to manage stress. These are all things that are very, very important. Now, on top of that, there's a lot of variables that can increase or speed up the aging process. And so we have to look at our individual lives in that way. If you're someone who lives in the countryside, you're not around a lot of people, you're not in a big populated city, the way you might approach your age and your fertility might be different than someone who lives in a highly dense, populated city with a lot of pollution and a lot of chemicals and a lot of exposure to toxins and so forth, right? So those are all different variables. We're all going to have to make different decisions, but we want to reduce the exposure to toxins. We want to reduce the exposure to chemicals because these things impact our cells and cause our cells to degenerate faster. Mm-hmm. We want to reduce and minimize oxidative stress on the body. And that comes in many forms. If you're eating a lot of junk food and soda and sugar, right? Those are things that you're impacting the body and you're causing the cells to age much faster than if you are eating more healthy. You're eating a lot more organic, a lot of vegetables, a lot of healthy fats. That's going to be a different thing for you, right? So all of us need to look at our health individually. Now, I think a big piece that we often ignore is our digestive system. So we often, when we're looking at fertility, we tend to put on our blinders and just think about our ovaries and our uterus and our fallopian tubes. We might also, hopefully also think about sperm and testes, right? But these are not, our body is not isolated. It doesn't have walls and barriers separating each system in the body. You know, they're all connected and they all communicate with one another. So you want to make sure that your adrenal function, your nervous system is functioning properly. You want to make sure that your endocrine system and obviously your your reproductive function is part of your endocrine system, but there's a lot of other pieces that are part of that endocrine system that we can't ignore either, which often do. So we want to make sure that your thyroid is functioning properly. We want to look at our digestive system, because I find that many people ignore their digestive system, and our digestive system is system number one that needs to be functioning properly for everything else in the body to function well. And so these are the sorts of things that we have to assess for ourselves. You know, take some time. Do I have regular digestion? Do I have regular bowel movements? Do I sleep well? Do I manage my stress well? You know, look at all the different parts of your body and your health and analyze it on your own. And you'll probably be able to say, well, okay, I could give this a little bit more attention. I can give that a little bit more attention. The other piece of this is with this question right here, like, should I, what fertility treatment should I try when I hit 35? And for me, it's not about, you shouldn't be considering fertility treatments if you haven't looked deeper at figuring out what's going on and why those things are causing problems, or why they're interrupting or influencing your reproductive organs, or reproductive system. So if everything is functioning properly, if you've spent the right time to assess your entire health, all the different systems, and you've got an idea of how everything's functioning, and you've checked off all the boxes, yes, I'm doing well in all these areas, then I think at that point you can start to have that conversation with yourself or a healthcare provider to help you determine which fertility treatments might be best suited for you. But I always like to think about the least invasive before I think about the most invasive. So for me, it's a progression before I ever get to some of those more advanced techniques.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dr. Mark. So that naturally lead to some discussion about ovarian reserve or egg quality. So I know that, you know, the fertility is some reflection of your body, right? Such as egg quality, ovarian reserve, how regular your hormone is. So maybe we can talk deeper into those, like how those things are really affecting your fertility. And I know Shine in our audience just asked a question, and she said, I'm already 44 years old, so how can I improve my egg quality?
Yeah, so ovarian reserve is very similar. You know, we often use the word ovarian reserve and egg quality interchangeably. And I want to separate them for a second. I want to clarify that, okay? When you're doing lab testing, hormone testing, and you're trying to understand how healthy is the quality of your eggs, and how many eggs do I have left? Those are two separate questions, okay? And they are assessed in different ways. So FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, when it's tested on day 2, 3, or 4, is the primary factor and hormone that we use to test egg quality. And ovarian and AMH, anti-Müllerian hormone, is the primary hormone we use to check ovarian reserve, how many eggs we have left. Now, we could never determine exactly how many eggs. So like, you know, an AMH number of 2 doesn't necessarily mean you have 200 million eggs left. Like, we don't know those exact numbers, but we do know that we want those numbers to be in certain ranges. So FSH, we'd like to see somewhere between 5 and 10. And AMH, we'd like to see over 1, but obviously depending on your age, that number could be higher and should be higher. So, you know, it just depends on how old you are, and how many eggs theoretically should be left will depend on where that number is. With this notion of improving ovarian reserve, we've all been taught from a young age that women are born with the amount of eggs that they have. And by the time they get to menarche, that they've lost, you know, hundreds of thousands of eggs, and that with each ovulation you're losing eggs, right? Because women will recruit a number of follicles every cycle, but only 1, maybe 2 on some cycles will mature enough to be ovulated out and be ready to be fertilized. But we lose all of those that kind of were recruited for that specific cycle. So every cycle you're losing eggs. Now, that's what we were always taught, right? So if AMH is an indicator for ovarian reserve, then we would only see that number go down over time. We'd never see that number go up, right? Well, I see that number go up all the time. So why is that? Are we really, are we increasing ovarian reserve, or as this question asks, are we improving ovarian reserve? Like, can we create more eggs? Now, there is a small population of research that is starting out that's trying to see, is the theory that we've had all of these years actually accurate, or were we wrong? And are we now seeing that women can actually regenerate new eggs and create new eggs so that they can improve ovarian reserve, right? So there is a little bit of research trying to investigate that, and some small data that shows that that may be able to happen. But I also find that there's variables that influence AMH levels in ovarian reserve. So vitamin D is a strong correlator with AMH, that if your vitamin D is very low and your AMH is low, if we can improve vitamin D, often we see AMH go up. Okay, so there's some research around that. Additionally, I'm not 100% convinced that AMH is the most accurate test that we have for ovarian reserve, because it is fluctuating and changing and moving, which makes me question its validity and its accuracy, right? But I would pose this question to everybody listening. If we regenerate and create new cells in our body all the time, why can't we regenerate and create new cells that make up eggs in our ovaries as well, right? So I think that there's a potential there, right? And so we have to then start to say to ourselves, well, what can we do to improve and affect ovarian reserve if that is the case? And that comes down to making sure that we are providing our body with a lot of great antioxidants, that we're eating well, that we're increasing blood circulation to our ovaries. We always want to have increased blood circulation to our ovaries. And one of my favorite tools to do that is acupuncture, because it does do that very well. We want to exercise is also a good way to do that, but we don't want to overdo it. And then it's really about working on the basics, right? This is anti-aging reproductive medicine, right? Think of anything that you would do to improve and slow down the aging process. You've got to do the same thing, or similar, I should say, for your ovaries, to slow down the aging process, hopefully reverse it and improve ovarian reserve or egg quality. So there is this question about antral follicle count. An antral follicle count is an ultrasound that is done at the beginning of your cycle to see how many eggs you have being recruited that cycle. I often have women who will say to me, well, I was told that my antral follicle count is 8, so I only have 8 eggs left. That's not true, okay? Every month, you're gonna produce more eggs or new eggs, right? New follicles. And so what you're seeing on that ultrasound on that given cycle is only what's there for that cycle. It doesn't mean that's all you have left. It also doesn't mean that's the only amount that you're going to recruit every cycle. That can fluctuate if you make changes, and just like we've been talking about, so that you could see that antral follicle count go up. So don't be scared by that number either. I often have women who will say that, I'm really scared. I think I don't have a lot of eggs left because of that ultrasound, and that's not always the case.
Sounds good. So we got an interesting question here, Dr. Mark. So people are asking about, she's 45 years old and she's turning 46 or around that age. And then she wants to know realistically, how much chance does she really have to get pregnant?
Yeah, once we get to those, I would say, let's just say past 42, 43, our chances are pretty low to conceive every given cycle, okay? We're talking about 5% or lower every given cycle. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. I've had plenty of women in their, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48 get pregnant. But your chances are definitely lower. So you have to decide, one, is it something that I want to continue to do and try? If, do you try other interventions? This is the time, this is potentially an age range once we hit 40 and above that we start to have conversations about IUI and IVF, and is that worthwhile, and does that make sense, and will it increase my chances? And so, you just have to start to understand what your chances are and how much time you're willing to give at that age.
Sounds great. So we already talked about the, really interesting, the ovarian reserve egg quality. And another thing associated with your fertility is definitely the hormone level. And we got some questions in the audience too, and saying, I'm closer to menopause, and we are really gonna be working for me. Is it gonna detect the pattern? So maybe Dr. Marc, you can briefly describe the how hormones are affecting or really driving the fertility level across the months, and what kind of hormones are, why people need to basically track hormones in order to understand fertility.
Yeah. One, I'm a firm believer of testing and not guessing, right? We want to have information, sound information that we can use to make real decisions about your fertility and your health. So many of you are reading blog posts or searching on Dr. Google or reading on social media. And I have nothing against all those things. That might be how you found Mira or myself. So I have nothing against those things. But just because someone said something or a friend told you something or you read something online doesn't mean that that's the right thing for you to do as an individual and as a unique individual, right? We need to find out what's appropriate for you based on your hormones. And so I think that's a really important concept for all of you to get, because that will then really make sense as to why we want to do testing and why we want to test regularly and why it's important to track this information, right? So there are some primary hormones that are essential for us to track, and they're listed right here on your screen. The first one is estradiol, or estrogen. So there are 3 types of estrogen, and estradiol is the second one, often referred to as E2. It's of the 3 estrogens, it's the most important for what we want to discuss. And it's most dominant in the follicular phase, in this first half of the cycle. And it starts to rise as we get closer towards ovulation. You could see that starting to peak, okay? And estrogen is essential for helping to build the uterine lining, but it does so much more. There's a feedback and communication between estrogen and progesterone. There's a feedback between estrogen and FSH. So there's a lot of communication between all these hormones. But if we're simplifying it, estrogen is most dominant in the first half of your cycle, and then it starts to rise as we get towards ovulation. If you think of your hormonal lifespan in the same way as you're looking at your menstrual cycle, it's the same thing as, in terms of a whole lifespan. Before menopause would be the follicular phase of things. And as you're getting closer towards menopause, maybe your estrogen starts to rise a little bit. And then as we get closer, and there starts to become some instability, as we get closer towards menopause or past perimenopause and into menopause, that number will come down. Estrogen will drop. Okay, and you start to lose, which is why we start to, why so many people want to replenish estrogen levels after menopause. So it's very similar in that way. Now, progesterone is a little bit different. Progesterone is relatively low in the beginning of the cycle, in the follicular phase, and then it starts to rise after ovulation. And we want to see its peak 7 days post ovulation. You could see that around, in this case, let's say around day 21, 22, you could see that it peaks and then starts to come down. Once you're pregnant, that will actually stay elevated, okay? So progesterone is really important because it helps to hold a pregnancy. So we want to make sure that our progesterone levels are high in our luteal phase and that they maintain that level into the pregnancy. Now, LH is a little bit different. LH, its primary function is is for ovulation purposes, and it's not that we don't check it. Like I think I had mentioned when we're checking hormones on day 2, 3, or 4, we're going to check estradiol, FSH, and LH. Those are some primary ones, as well as AMH. I will often, by the way, test progesterone, but just to confirm that it's low. I'm not expecting it to do anything else at that time of the cycle, but I'll often just check it just to confirm. Now, LH and FSH talk to each other. They're communicating, and they work synergistically. So in the beginning part of your cycle, we want those to be relatively low, okay? And then LH will rise during ovulation. FSH is the main hormone that we talked about before for egg quality. Yes, for egg quality, excuse me. It's also the hormone that will communicate to your ovaries to get your follicles, your eggs, to start to grow and mature in that follicular phase leading up to ovulation. So then that one follicle could become more dominant and then be ready for ovulation, okay? Now, FSH will rise and can rise dramatically as we become perimenopausal and get into menopause. And so that's why we also track that number, because the higher the FSH gets, the more concerned we are over menopause. So we want to bring that number back down. Now, FSH is a little bit more volatile of a number, of a hormone, and it can fluctuate quite a bit from cycle to cycle. So that's something also to take into account as well, that when that number is lower, that you will have a much higher chance of conception that cycle than you will when that number is higher.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dr. Mark. So I know we got some questions about, my hormone is getting higher or lower, around the perimenopause. So how this gonna affect the Mira's tracking? The good news is that the Mira tracks your actual fertility hormone concentrations. So regardless which stage you are in your cycle or in your life stage or so on, Mira will always give you your actual number. So how your hormone actually is in your body. So yes, that will work for you if you're about to ovulate and you will have a surge in the estrogen and also in the LH levels. And however, your pattern might be different. So when you're getting older, or one cycle could be different from another cycle. So those are very interesting information you will find about your own body. And if you see you're not ovulating or your hormone gets too high or too low, and it might be actually a good information to discuss with your doctor.
Yeah, that's one of the beautiful things about tracking your hormones with Mira, is that you can see those fluctuations from cycle to cycle, right? And you want to have more stability as you get older. So it tells you, and then you can start to be proactive and make changes.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. So I think that we want to take the more questions from here, and obviously we have some other topics to cover, but we can do that while we go along. So we got an interesting question here saying, how does taking fertility treatment pills such as Clomid help with ovulation and egg quality?
Okay. So Clomid is not going to help with egg quality per se, okay? But it does, Clomid is stimulating your brain, your pituitary, to produce more FSH. And so it's gonna cause your pituitary to secrete more FSH to stimulate follicular growth, egg growth, okay? And it's important for two reasons. One is, if you have a regular cycle and you're ovulating regularly, then the benefit of Clomid is that hopefully it's gonna recruit more follicles to mature so that you're ovulating more than one, hopefully 2 or 3. And that's really a benefit, because then it starts to increase your chances of fertilization because you have more eggs to fertilize. The other benefit of Clomid is that it's going to, is for those women who are not having a regular ovulation. You're not ovulating regularly, then taking Clomid could definitely improve that and cause you to ovulate more consistently and more regularly. that does come with some side effects because Clomid does have some side effects associated with it. So you have to be mindful of that. Hopefully you don't experience that with just a one-off usage of it, that it's more after prolonged use that you start to have some of those side effects. But Clomid's not specifically going to help with egg quality. That's not the case.
Got it. Got it. So Nikki, I hope that answered your question. So another question I think is very interesting. So Anna is asking, she had the COVID-19 in June. Unfortunately, she got pregnant after that.
So I think there's a lot of other questions that I would have around that. I'd want to know how severe or mild that case was, and are you fully recovered from it? And quite frankly, I will say that I don't think any of us can answer that question right now when it comes to are you fully recovered, because we just don't know long-term what that means. We haven't seen enough cases to be able to monitor that and see what the long-term effects of having COVID is on just in general your health, but certainly not on fertility or pregnancy. So I would encourage you, before you start trying again, is to probably wait a few cycles and just see how your health is, how you're feeling. Hopefully by then we'll also have a little bit more information and data on its implications towards your overall health long-term, possibly even fertility. I did just, on an interesting note for everybody, I did just read a small research study that showed that men who had COVID, even with mild symptoms, are potentially at risk for it to affect their fertility, their sperm quality. So we just don't know all the answers to it right now, unfortunately.
I see. Yeah. So probably the best way to know is really try to pay more attention to yourself. So where you feel comfortable, are you really recovering, and seek for some advice from your doctor, and follow more like what your body is telling you.
Yeah. And I do think, absolutely. And I do think that's where testing will come in, right? Because you can test now, and then you can test in 3 months and see are the numbers changing, or do they look any different? Maybe do, an antral follicle count as well, just to see and gauge, and just be tracking more than anything right now.
That sounds great. Yeah, exactly. So another question from Stephanie. So she's saying, I love the Mira. I feel confident in understanding where my LH numbers are. But she has a backwards uterus, and she feels like that's really making her hard to get pregnant. So does it really affect her chance?
Her uterus is tilted backwards. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
So it's called retroverted. If you asked your OB would say, no, it doesn't affect your fertility. You're fine. If you ask me, I would say, yes, I think it affects your fertility. It makes it more difficult, especially if it's a, more dramatic retroversion versus slight. I actually have a whole video on this topic of the position of your uterus and your cervix and how it might impact your fertility. I think the place where so if you're going to go forward with IUI or IVF, I don't think it's going to impact that at all. Okay. But if you're going to try naturally at home, then I do think that it would impact your chances. And I think that's where potentially using different sexual positions to account for that would come in handy.
Sounds great. So we do have 2 questions about Mira here. I just want to answer them. So one is from Savannah. There is another one, I think from another girl. So basically they're asking I'm testing, Elizabeth. So they're asking I'm testing with my Mira, but I got the lower numbers than what I expected. Why I don't show high, or why Mira maybe just give me medium during the day of my ovulation. So the answer is everyone's different. So your hormone pattern, as you see on this chart, will increase when you're about to ovulate. But the level of increasing is different for every cycle and different for every woman. So the high medium is usually defined by population average. However, with Mira, you can see your trend. The trend is so important because if your hormone level is lower than the average, sometimes it can be missed by OPK or something like that. So if you got medium and your baseline, which means your regular hormone number when you're not ovulating, those are low, and you see a very obvious increasing trend, it's highly possible that that's your ovulation date, or you're around your ovulation date already. So pay more attention to your long-term trend rather than the number. By looking at your question, I think you're fine, and the Mira is working properly too. And if you want to know more detail or having more similar questions like that, you can reach out to our support, which is support@miracare.com. So I just want to address that. Okay, great.
Can I say something about that
Sure.
piece real quick? So this is really the value. There's a couple important things here. One is, we all have to remember that although we're all humans, we're all different.
Exactly.
And so your pattern, your shift, your hormonal transitions are different than somebody else's, and we can't compare yours to somebody else's. You have to compare yours to yours, and that is the value of Mira. If you're also using those the simple cheap LH kits at home, we have to remember that those are designed for a perfectly hormonally balanced 20-year-old, okay? And so, just like Sylvia was saying, if your LH triggers at a different number to ovulate, it might not show up on those kits, but on the Mira, you'll see that transition, you'll see that pattern, and that's how you'll know. And so that's really the importance. And so that, kind of bringing home, and kind of all of us really, I know I keep saying this, is that we're all different, all unique. We have to understand our bodies so that we can get the results that we need individually. So I just wanted to chime in and say that.
Sure. So while we're discussing about hormones, I'd like to mention that Mira is releasing the estrogen plus LH test one really soon. So hopefully next month or early September. So then at that time, we will have LH test. We'll also have estrogen test. So you can see your full fertile window, you can see your full non-fertile window. And as Dr. Mark mentioned, estrogen is a really important hormone because that gives you not only your fertile window, but gives you other indicators as well. Like when you're closing to menopause, or you have certain pathological conditions, your estrogen will change too. And then after that, in our product pipeline, we will be developing progesterone test and also HCG test. Those two tests are so important. Progesterone can confirm your ovulation. So you will know, when ovulation is completely done if you're trying to avoid pregnancy. And also the progesterone together with HCG will track your pregnancy progress. So that will track your fetal growth. I'm talking about this because I saw one question from Tracy, and she is asking Dr. Mark, she said, can you explain the correlation between progesterone and HCG? How can we ensure we keep those hormones high to maintain high levels once pregnancy is confirmed?
This is the $1 million question. So they are individual hormones. It's not like if progesterone is elevated, it will signal your HCG to double progressively on its own. They are independent hormones. So they're not going to dramatically influence one another. I always love to tell all of you listening of all the positive results and all the good news that I have with the couples that I coach and work with. But sometimes, we don't have that good news. We don't see the results that we're trying to see and hoping for. And this week I had, 2 patients just like that, where their HCGs, you normally, when you get pregnant, we want to see HCG for the most part double. It's an easy calculation. Now, it doesn't have to exactly double. So I do want to say that, and that would be every 48 hours. But we do want to see it rising and going up. And simultaneously, I want to see progesterone be at least 20 or above. when I start to see that go down, then I start to get concerned. And the two women that I'm thinking of right now, we were seeing that, I was seeing the same thing, seeing HCG going up, but not quite in the dramatic fashion as I would like. And then progesterone was fluctuating. It'd go down one time I would take it and read it and then it would go up the next time and kind of fluctuate a little bit, but it would never, in both cases, never hit 20 or above. So we really want to see that number go up. When progesterone is elevated during a pregnancy, it shows you've got a healthy pregnancy, good hormones are being produced, and the likelihood of maintaining and holding that pregnancy is much higher. So really, when you ask, like, what can we do to stabilize it and keep it elevated, the only thing I think of in that situation is really progesterone, is giving you progesterone. That is going to be the number one thing that we would like to do. Does it always work? No. I mean, it will always, giving you progesterone will always raise your levels, but it might not always, save a pregnancy. And so we have to just be mindful of that. But I do think that that's important. I will say that the sooner you get on the progesterone, the more likely that it's going to be supportive in the manner that you want it to be. Okay. One of the women that I was just mentioning, she didn't want to get on progesterone. And when I saw her first reading, I said, I think it would be a good idea. It's not super low, but my concern would be that it keeps going down, and I would prefer to bump it up. And she made the choice not to go on progesterone, which is totally fine. It's up to her. But we keep seeing that number go down, and now she's going on it. I think today or tomorrow, she's going to go on it at the request of her OBGYN, which I'm happy for and grateful for that she's going on it. I'm just worried that it's too late, because now it's been 2 weeks. And so I just don't know if it's going to be supportive enough. The majority of research around progesterone does show that the sooner you get on it, the more beneficial it will be for you. So hopefully that answers that question. I'm not sure if it does, but hopefully it does.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. And that's exactly what Mira is trying to do as well, because we feel like, for our users, they spend so much time and efforts trying to get pregnant, they definitely don't want to lose a baby, or they don't want to lose it in a dangerous or risky way. So when Mira released the HCG test, which is going to track your fetal growth status, so you will know how the fetus is doing at home. So if there is something is about to happen, or there might be some sign for miscarriage, you can see your doctor early. There's a chance the baby can be saved back. If not, you will be in a safer place too.
Yeah.
Great. So I want to touch another topic, because I see a series of questions here about that, which is supplements. So we got a lady saying she's taking Q10, she's taking prenatal vitamin, DHEA, and are those things really helpful? What else can she do? And we also have another lady asking, she's taking melatonin for sleep. Is that going to affect trying to conceive? So maybe Dr. Mark, you can address the supplements in general a little bit.
Yeah. So, I'm a big fan of supplements and using them when it's necessary and in the right way. Mm-hmm. So, and I'm more cautious with things that are going to affect hormones, right? So I say that because DHEA is a hormone. Mm-hmm. It will affect your hormones. And as much as we all think and read that DHEA is great for fertility and helps with egg quality, and I'm not discounting that in any way, DHEA also is something that we have to be careful of, because it can negatively impact your cycles, your hormones, and your fertility as well. And we never really talk about that much. And so I never prescribe DHEA to anybody unless I have labs tested for DHEA. Okay. Now there are other things like CoQ10 that you're taking that certainly I don't think are going to hurt at all and can only benefit in many, many ways. And so go ahead, that's fine to take. But things that are going to influence hormones, I'm definitely going to be more cautious about giving, and really want to make sure that we see lab tests, and this comes back to testing. Now, if you're going to just start taking supplements because you read it was good for fertility, your list of supplements will grow very long, very quickly. okay? Because you can find all sorts of information about something being good for fertility. But again, this comes back to knowing why you're having issues, getting answers for where things are off for you as an individual, and then creating a plan around that. It doesn't mean you might not be on a lot of supplements, but at least those supplements will be specific to you based on the answers that you have versus just grabbing things because it says that it's good for fertility. So, and lastly, about the melatonin, you know, if you're taking melatonin for sleep, I think that's great. I would not go above 3 milligrams, and I prefer to keep it even lower than that. And I will say that there is some research to show that melatonin as an antioxidant, which many of us don't even think about, is beneficial for fertility and egg quality. So I'm not concerned about it affecting your fertility negatively in any way.
Great. So I saw a few questions about another topic, and I want to get it touched before we finish today. So the question is about fertility treatment. So there's a lady asking that she's already 44 years old, and she has the low AMH level, and FSH is already 10, but period is pretty regular. So in this case, should she just go to try IUI directly? Or, you know, basically, how can we, if we're above 35 or in advanced age, how can we, or when can we make a decision that, okay, now it's the time to go to fertility treatment?
Yeah, it all depends on each individual situation. But I think someone who's 44 has, you know, to have an AMH that's around 1-ish, I don't think that's bad in any way. To have an FSH around 10 at 44, I think is great. So I would think that actually your fertility for your age is actually pretty good. But you might still have higher chances by doing an IUI, right? Now, our chances of conception with our own eggs with IVF is not very high at that point in time, especially depending on the type of IVF procedure you're going to go and do, which is a whole different conversation that we don't have time for today. But I would always encourage that you start with the IUI first if you can.
Sounds great. So I know we still have a lot of questions here, but we don't have the time to cover every question. And the way we can do is, like, for Mira question, you guys can reach out to support@miracare.com. We do get back to you on every single question. And for Dr. Marc, you can always find him on the Fertility TV. And don't forget to subscribe, and you're gonna get the information brochure he presented at the beginning of this webinar. So before we finish, please remember that we also have a promotional code ongoing with Dr. Marc. If you enter the code Fertility TV when you check out with Mira, and if you're not a Mira user yet, you will get $25 off. So with that, I like to thank everyone who have been here today. I hope that this has been helpful to you, have been addressing some of your questions. If there's any more questions, feel free to let us know, and we hope to do more free webinars with you, in the future. And also, thanks, Dr. Marc, for your time.
Thank you for having me, Sylvia. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.